Well, first of all, I mean, who among us like hasn't had their father make an 11-minute compilation video, to show everyone like how open they are, or how great they are at sports? I mean, if your dad's not doing that, what are you doing?
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fights NFL preview show, Week 9. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me is Rotowire's Nick Whalen. Nick, I'm going to start off the show this week by just congratulating you. I know it's a big week. Your guy, Blake Bortles, officially back in the NFL. So congratulations to you and all of Jags Nation as he now makes his way to Wisconsin, which is where you're from. So look at that, full circle.
That is true. I mean, could not be a better scenario. I mean, we maybe are like one Jordan Love injury away from Blake Bortles potentially leading the Packers to a win over the Kansas City Chiefs this week. It's an ideal scenario. I mean, I couldn't be happier. I think the only thing that would make it better, Dan, is if, by the end of this show or maybe by the end of the week, the Jaguars are able to snag Odell Beckham off of waivers.
Yeah, that's the big breaking news here as we kind of get underway here this morning. Odell Beckham has been released by the Browns. I mean, after this just whole weird kind of saga the past couple weeks here, from his dad basically like putting together this huge video collection of how Baker Mayfield does not throw to him, to just being sent home at some point. And of course, you got the injury history. So now it's like, where's OBJ going to go? Where do you think he's going?
Well, first of all, I mean, who among us like hasn't had their father make an 11-minute compilation video, to show everyone like how open they are, or how great they are at sports? I mean, if your dad's not doing that, what are you doing? So to me, that's not an issue. It's going to be really interesting, I think, to see if he makes it through waivers, right? Because I mean, teams like Jacksonville, Detroit, Houston, like obviously there's a need for receiving talent there. And we'll have to see, how the contract breaks down, what kind of commitment you're looking at. But I almost hope that it doesn't go that way, because look, as awesome as it would be, for the rich to get richer and the Jags to add Odell Beckham, it would be a hell of a lot more fun if he went to a team, that could actually use him to potentially make a Super Bowl run. You're talking a team like, I don't know, Baltimore, Green Bay, some of these teams that could just maybe use one more piece. So for as much as I'd like to see him go to Jacksonville, I think it'd be a lot more fun if he latches on with the contender.
Yeah, me too. You got obviously the situation in Vegas. They need some receiving help. Buffalo could use them. The Patriots, I mean, Bill Belichick in the past has gone off about how much he loves the way Odell Beckham plays. So you never know what could happen there. And then one other quick little topic here I do want to touch on. There's been some like weird crossover sports news this Friday morning on November 5th. You kind of alerted us to this, Nick. So kind of break it down. I believe Frank Gore might have a new job soon.
That's correct. Let me bring up the tweet so I don't misquote anybody on this. This is from Shams Charania of The Athletic, a pretty reliable reporter. Former All-Star and two-time Olympic gold medalist Deron Williams will fight on the Jake Paul-Tommy Fury undercard bout on December 18th. Frank Gore, third on the NFL's all-time rushing list, is a potential opponent for Williams. Why is Frank Gore doing this? Like this seems like about right for Deron Williams. Like he's removed from the NBA just enough where it's like, yeah, he probably needs something to stay relevant. Frank Gore was in the NFL last year. He doesn't need any money. Like what is he doing this for?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, his kid's about to come to the NFL within the next couple of years.
Right.
Here. And I mean, like, I don't know what he's doing. Like, I mean, shouldn't he be helping his kid at this point, getting ready for the pros?
You would think.
Weird like height weight matchup. Deron Williams is 6'3" and Frank Gore's 5'9". They do weigh about the same, but
yeah,
6-inch difference.
Yeah.
I'd still take Frank in that matchup without a doubt.
I mean, of all the celebrity boxing matches, like normally I have no interest in this. I'm intrigued. All right. You get Deron Williams in a boxing ring. I'm going to at least be paying some attention.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Let's kind of talk about this week 9 slate. It's the end of the first half of the NFL season. When you wake up Tuesday morning, football season's halfway over. Very sad. It's going way too quick. Before you know it, it's going to be week 15, week 16, and we'll be talking playoffs. But here we are. Week 9, there really isn't that standout matchup outside of the Kansas City Green Bay game, which the wonderful Matthew Berry of ESPN joined Monkey Knife Fight Live this week. He'll be breaking down all of that game for you guys. So Nick and I are going to kind of touch on the scraps and what's left here. So let's start off, Nick, with your Jacksonville Jaguars. They're taking on the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen is one of the guys here we're looking at this week, more or less 296.5 passing yards. Allen has thrown for 297 or more in 3 of 7 games. The Jags, they rank 29th in the NFL against the pass. They're allowing about
Sure do.
278 yards per game. Allen is the number 1 ranked fantasy quarterback this week, pretty much on every single site. But my big question for you, Nick, and this is very important here. Will there be a meeting of the Josh Allens in the Buffalo backfield on Sunday?
I hope so. I mean, Josh Allen, the defensive end in Jacksonville, might be the only keeper on that Jags defense right now. Miles Jack, it's like game to game. Sometimes he looks good. Sometimes he looks like the worst linebacker in the NFL. But they have very little infrastructure on that defense right now, outside of Josh Allen, who I think is awesome and has kind of been overshadowed by how terrible the rest of the organization has been. As far as white quarterback Josh Allen, I'm going to go more on 296.5. You laid out a pretty compelling case for why this Jags defense especially is terrible. They're second in the league in net yards per attempt allowed, behind only the lowly Detroit Lions. And that number, of course, for Detroit was boosted by how they played last week against Philly. So, I think a lot of people thought Jacksonville would come out and be able to put up a fight against that Seattle team, albeit on the road. But with Geno Smith at quarterback, I think there was some belief that Trevor Lawrence might be the better option in that game. And Jacksonville came out as flat as they've looked all year. That to me, was kind of emblematic of how, what kind of character this team has. You're coming off of a bye, you're coming off of a win, finally an opportunity to really build some momentum. And you play arguably your worst game of the year, start to finish. So I don't see them righting the ship against a team. I used this term last week, a wagon. The Bills are absolutely a wagon. Shout out to John McKechnie. And this one could get pretty ugly. I mean, I would not be surprised if by the end of Sunday afternoon, you look up and it's like Bills 51, Jaguars 14, if that.
Yeah, I like the more for Allen as well. But what I really want to know is if, like the Josh Allens are going to get together at some point in this game afterwards. I just want to know. I mean, I think it'd be a cool thing. They both got the same name. They could hit each other at some point in this,
right.
So it's a good little name matchup. Anyways, right. Another quarterback here. Let's kind of build a slate today, since there's not really, there's really not that go-to game that everybody's going to have their eyes on, especially in the early 1 o'clock window Eastern time. So let's talk about Derek Carr, 275.5 passing yards. He's thrown for 276 or more in 5 of 7 games. He's been way over in all of those games as well. You kind of know with Carr, if he's going all out, he's going all out. There's really right. No concern in sweating it out in the second half for him to go get with the over there. He's facing the New York Giants this week. It's that East Coast trip for the Las Vegas Raiders. Giants are middle of the pack against the pass. They're allowing about 245 yards per game. Mahomes just threw for 275 on the dot against them Monday Night Football this past week. And then obviously the tragedy with Henry Ruggs and all of that going on there as well. So Derek Carr does not have his deep threat, his normal deep threat, which I'm a little worried about how he's going to get over 275 at that point. How about you?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, on the other hand, he is getting Darren Waller back. He missed the Philly game before the bye, so that's big. I don't know that it necessarily offsets the absence of Ruggs, and I think it's easy to look at Ruggs' numbers and say like, he's usually only worth like 1 or 2 big catches a game, but I think it's just the threat of having that guy out there. It's like you could just have him run a fly essentially on every single play, and you have to account for him because he can run by pretty much everybody. And you take that away all of a sudden, and your safeties don't have to be playing so far off the line to account for that speed gap. So I think you're right to be a little concerned there. It's been tough to know what to make of the Giants too, right? I mean, I think they've played pretty well these last couple of weeks. I mean, they've had some kind of glaring mental errors. They've had a lot of injuries, like in-game injuries, even against Kansas City, that I think caught up to them. But this is an interesting spot. Like this line you would think would maybe be a little bit more in favor of the Raiders. I think it's Giants +3. So there's some belief that the Giants will be able to hang around in this one. But I don't know that Oakland's going to be able to, or Las Vegas is going to be able to move the ball on the ground all that well against this Giants defense. So Ruggs or no Ruggs, I think Derek Carr is going to have to lean on the pass. I think having Darren Waller back helps that a ton. So I'm going to go just over on 275.5. To me, it didn't really feel like Mahomes played well again in that game last week. And he still was able to get to 275 in a game where, they turned it over. They, both teams were taking up a ton of time of possession. I think the Raiders are able to get it going a little bit more, and Carr gets back on track here.
Yep. And then I'm going to go less just because I think that number is just a little too high for me. Mm-hmm. But one other quarterback here. I don't think he's on our slate right now that we're talking about, but I do want to talk about Dak. He is expected to be good to go this weekend. 270.5 is his more or less. They're taking on the Denver Broncos, who they're top 10 in the NFL. Denver, sneaky good defense, and they're going to be playing this game at Mile High, right? So I'm a little worried there. And CD Lamb sprained his ankle. Dak, he's thrown for 271 or more in 3 of 6 games this season. Can he do that without CD this week if CD is not playing?
I mean, I think the Cowboys are one of the few teams that is able to absorb a loss like that. If CD doesn't play, I mean, you still have a fantastic core of receivers there. So obviously, I think CD Lamb is maybe the most talented of that group, but being able to fall back on a receiving core still led by Amari Cooper is a pretty nice luxury. So I think Dallas will be fine. And Denver, it's hard to, I think, as an organization, get up for a game when you just traded away your best player. Right. Where it's like, all right, we got to go win this game. Well, then why did we go give away a guy who would have helped us win this game? So I think it's kind of an interesting analysis, like mentally for this Denver team, where it's like, you're not out of it in the playoff race, especially with the extra spot this year, but your team is also making moves to, kind of make your team worse in the short term and build for the future. So to me, I always like to kind of go against those teams because I think there's somewhat of a disconnect as far as what the goals are from the front office to the guys on the field. So even without CD Lamb, I do think Dallas cruises in this one. And I mean, Dak has looked really, really good whenever he's been out there. Sounds like he could have played last week. So I don't really see the calf being that much of an issue for him.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the more as well. As all the things you mentioned, there's something weird's going on in Denver now. Like, I mean, we all were skeptical of that 3-0 start, after some of the teams they beat, Houston, the Jets, Jacksonville, just some problems there. I mean, you got the whole ownership problem too, because the Bowen kids are just fighting with each other, which is a really just kind of messy thing going on. They're about to sell the team. So let's talk about some running backs here. We got Nick Chubb up on the screen, 88.5 rushing yards is his more or less. He's rushed for 89 or more in 3 of 6 games. But last week, though, struggled against Pittsburgh. His season low, 61 yards was his total against the Steelers last week. Cincinnati ranks 7th in the NFL against the run, allowing about 94 yards per game. But 5 career games against the Bengals for Chubb. He's averaging 93 yards in those contests. Can he get to 89 yards this week?
I think he can. I think for the most part, I thought he actually looked pretty decent last week. I thought Pittsburgh just did a really, really good job of kind of stuffing the box and containing Nick Chubb. I think right now, like Cleveland's passing game is just so broken that I don't think there's a lot of respect for it. Like every time they drop back to pass, it just seems like they have to work so hard to find an open receiver. And then you got guys dropping passes. You got Jarvis Landry. You had 2 huge drops toward the end of that game. And even though they haven't really gotten anything out of Odell Beckham, I mean, it's clear that the rest of the league respects this guy. I mean, there were like 3 or 4 opposing defensive backs who were tweeting about like how they're basically on Odell's side here. So even though the numbers might not be there, like taking him away from that passing offense, I think is still kind of a big deal. You don't really have a natural replacement for Odell Beckham. So I'm a little concerned about, even kind of more of a lack of respect for this Cleveland passing game. How much is Cincinnati able to load up in the box? But I think what was really encouraging to me is that Nick Chubb, coming off of that injury, there was still some question as to whether he would play a couple of days before that game. Probably wasn't at 100% and still carried the ball 16 times in a game where they had to kind of get away from the run late. So I trust his workload. And even if he's not breaking big ones against a really good Cincinnati defense, I think he's just going to get enough carries that he'll kind of be able to gradually chip away. And then by the end of the game, you look up and he's got like 95 yards.
Yeah, I mean, I'll side with you there. I think he can get there, especially with Kareem Hunt still out too. The carries are going to be there for him. Another running back here, you got Dalvin Cook, 81.5. He's not on our screen right now, but I do want to talk about Dalvin because he's going up against Baltimore this week. Baltimore, very good rushing defense. They're 4th best in the NFL, allowing just 86 yards a game. And they're coming off a bye this week too. So they've been preparing for Dalvin for 2 weeks now. Dalvin's number is 81.5. He's rushed for 82 or more in 2 of 5 games this season. I don't think he's going to get to 82 this week. I think that Baltimore defense is just too good.
Yeah, I mean, the Baltimore defense has been really good, except for that Cincinnati game where they were just getting gashed left and right. And that's kind of what's still fresh in my mind. So that worries me a little bit. But like you said, coming off of the bye, I think is huge, especially for a team like Baltimore that traditionally is so well coached and that defense is so solid. It's really hard to imagine them having 2 games like that in a row. And I mean, this is such a tough game for me to project because it's kind of a back against the wall game for Minnesota, right? I mean, the way that you lose that game to Dallas last week, there's a lot of pressure now to come out and not fall flat in this one and look a lot better. I expect them to be more aggressive passing the ball. I think they got way too conservative in that game against Dallas. We'll see if maybe they overcompensate and get away from the run in this one. But at the end of the day, I'm with you on this one. I think you have to side with the Baltimore defense over the Minnesota offense.
Yep, that's how I'm feeling. That's what I'm thinking anyway. So
Yep.
let's move on. Let's talk a couple wide receivers here. We got Stephon Diggs, 90.5 receiving yards. He's reached 90 just once this season. Last year, he had 10 games with over 90 yards. So it's been a really interesting and a bit of a step back for Stephon Diggs in year 2 in Buffalo. Do you trust him to get to 91 yards against Jacksonville? I do. If we're both going kind of all in on Josh Allen, the quarterback, I don't know how Josh Allen's going to get to close to 300 yards without Stephon Diggs playing a big part in that.
Yeah, that's an automatic over for me. They're playing the Jaguars. There's nothing else to say here. Stephon Diggs probably has a massive game. He might get there on 2 catches.
Yep. And then what do we have, receptions up there, Jay, for Diggs? Or is it the yard? Yeah, that's what we have. We're both going more. And then we got Darren Waller too. So he's returning against the Giants, who aren't great. I'm gonna go more 6.5 receptions for Waller too.
Yeah, this is one too where it's like I don't know that we would find a stat that makes you say like this is 100% he's getting to 7 catches, but there's a lot of context here. The target numbers have been really good for Waller in the games when he's been healthy. He catches a high percentage of his targets, and like you said, taking away the Ruggs factor, I think that maybe affects how you're able to kind of push the ball downfield to those other receivers. I think we could see Derek Carr be even more reliant on Darren Waller in this game. So I could see him having 12 to 15 targets in this game. He had 19 targets already in a game this season, so it's very possible.
Yeah, we've seen Carr go complete tunnel vision to Waller before, and it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And it worked. They won the game.
Yeah, yes, they did. Yes, they did. One other receiver I do want to talk about in that early window, and that's DJ Moore, 80.5 receiving yards for the Panthers. They're taking on the Patriots this week. Moore has reached 81 or more receiving yards in just 2 of 8 games this season. He hasn't done it in the last 4. We also don't know who's going to be throwing him the football this week. Sam Darnold, concussion protocol. His numbers, it's down to 75.5. That number's still just a little too high for me. With Darnold, has been a mess, especially his career against Bill Belichick is a nightmare. We all remember I'm seeing ghost games on Monday Night Football a couple of years ago, or potentially PJ Walker could be throwing him the ball. The XFL legend, PJ Walker, could be throwing him the ball. So, and possibly Christian McCaffrey could be back too. We don't know about that. So there's just so many other factors here. And the Patriots always do such a good job of taking your best thing away from you. And that's DJ Moore. So I'm going less than 75.5.
Yeah, same here. You laid it out really well. I mean, that's 4 games in a row he's been under this number. I don't see how facing this Patriots defense, which looks really dialed in right now, would make you feel like this is the game where he snaps out of it. And even like if you watch those first 4 games of the year where he had at least 79 yards in each of them, like a lot of that production came at the end of game, garbage time. He's looked good, obviously early on, but still to me, not like a true number 1 guy on a team that's still searching for that. And if you're the Patriots, I think you're hoping Sam Darnold starts this game, right? Like Bill Belichick against Sam Darnold. Like I think that's the matchup you want.
Absolutely. Matt Judon will be in his face all day long.
Right.
That's what I'm expecting. All right. A couple noteworthy guys in the late afternoon slate. We'll start with Justin Herbert, 270.5 passing yards. Coming off 2 straight lackluster performances, just 223 yards for Herbert last week against the Pats, 195 against Baltimore a couple weeks before that. He's playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who rank top 10 in the NFL against the pass, which I find to just kind of be surprising. But they only are allowing about 220 yards per game. I'm going to go more on Herbert. I think he will kind of snap out of his funk here this week against Philly. Yeah,
I think so too. I think he's had 2 very weird games back to back for a guy who's as good and as talented as he is. I don't think that continues here at all. Mike Williams was banged up each of the last 2 weeks. I think that's affected him a little bit. They relied on a lot of, kind of big chunk play, jump ball type of scenarios early in the season to move the ball. And with Mike Williams not looking like himself, I think that element was kind of partially removed from the offense these last couple of weeks. But with this offense at full strength, I think they'll be just fine. I think this game, the spread is pretty close on this one as well. I think people are kind of jumping back on the Eagles based on the way that they beat the Detroit Lions, which I'm not sure necessarily adds up transitive property wise. So even though the Chargers, I think have kind of lost some of the luster that they built up early in the year, I think they're still a dramatically better team than Philadelphia. And granted, traveling across the country, always tough. If this game was in LA, you'd maybe feel differently, but I think this is a game for the Chargers and Justin Herbert to get back on track. So I'll join you on the more there.
All right. One other quarterback I do want to talk about, and that's Kyler Murray. 266.5 is his more or less. He's thrown for 267 yards or more in 5 of 8 games this season, including a few. He barely just got over that mark. He's got a 268 in there. He's got a 289 in there, 274. So kind of been hovering around that for most of the year. San Francisco is top 3 in the NFL against the pass, allowing just 196 yards per game. Week 5, these two teams already played once. Kyler finished with 239 yards through the air, and it appears that he's dealing with an injury. He's got that sprained ankle. He's had 10 days, since his last game against Green Bay. I'm going to go less just because he struggled against San Francisco his entire career, and I don't think he's going to be able to get to 267.
Yeah, it feels like the 49ers are maybe rounding into form a little bit. Although I will say, I watched that whole game against Chicago last week, and I was not impressed with how that defense played Justin Fields. It honestly, it looked like they were not aware that he was a mobile quarterback. Like the amount of times that Nick Bosa lost contain on the outside and just like kind of forgot that Justin Fields has the ability to run was a little bit shocking to me. And obviously Kyler Murray has that same ability. So if he does play in this game and that ankle feels fine, I'm a little worried about how well they're able to contain him. But I also had those same concerns about the Green Bay defense, and they did a fantastic job of swallowing up Kyler Murray. So maybe, the book is somewhat out as far as, ways to contain him. And certainly the 49ers have the personnel to do so. The biggest thing that worries me, though, is the ankle for Kyler. He didn't practice at all on Thursday. We'll see what his activity level is on Friday. But other than that, I mean, Chase Edmonds also limited on Thursday. DeAndre Hopkins has not practiced all week. I think there's a decent chance that he doesn't play. So even if Kyler does push through the injury, he might not have his normal weapons against a defense that, again, has a lot of talent. And like you said, has kind of had his number over these last couple of years.
Yep. And then we got a big matchup on Sunday Night Football, Rams, Titans. This one, I was really looking forward to seeing Derrick Henry run all over the Rams, but that's not going to happen as he's dealing with that injury, unfortunately. But there's still plenty of good fantasy options here in this one. You got Matthew Stafford and Ryan Tannehill at quarterback. Stafford, 309.5 is his more or less. That number just feels just a little too high for me, but we've seen Stafford deliver before. How do you feel?
Yeah, we certainly have. I mean, he had that kind of weird patch of games against like Arizona and Seattle where he was just missing throws left and right, but he's been dialed in these last couple of weeks. He's been over 300 yards against Houston and Detroit. Obviously, two defenses that are a little bit prone to allowing yardage, we'll say. But I think this is a good spot for him. I do think it almost feels like Tennessee is due for a letdown game. And I think we thought that might happen, against KC. We thought that might happen last week for them against Indy. It just feels like, the injury to Derrick Henry and the way that they've played these close, tough games over the last few weeks is finally going to catch up to them here. I really like the Rams in this spot. But of course the question is, does Stafford, throw the ball enough or throw for enough air yards, I guess, to get over that number? It definitely feels a little bit high. But I do feel like this Titans defense is a little bit vulnerable through the air. I think the offense is what's really carried them these last few weeks, Chiefs game aside. I still have some questions about that defense. So the one question mark for me here, though, Robert Woods did not practice on Thursday. He's dealing with a foot injury. If he sits, maybe that doesn't make me feel quite as good. He's such a good yak yardage guy. But I think I'll go opposite of you on this one, Dan. I think I don't trust that Titans defense whatsoever. And I do trust this Rams offense. I think they're still one of the most dependable units in the league, if not the most. So I think this is the day where Stafford has his way and the Titans kind of come crashing back down to earth without Derrick Henry.
So if you're going more on Matthew Stafford, I got to assume you're going more on Cooper Kupp as well, right?
White Randy Moss? Yeah, of course. I think I have to, right?
I mean three straight games over 100 yards, another one with 92. That more or less is huge, 104.5. You don't see that too often here on MKF, but I like the more there for Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, same here. I mean, especially with Woods potentially being out of this game, I think that funnels even more targets to Cooper Kupp. His game against Houston last week was the first time that he hasn't had double-digit targets in a game, and he still had 7 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I think he has by far the highest floor of any receiver in the league right now, and I'm not even sure it's close. Devontae Adams, I guess, is probably in that category, but man, it's just amazing what he's been able to do so far.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to watch. Last guy here, Ryan Tannehill, 240.5 is his more or less. I'm going to go with more just because I think the Titans are going to have to throw to stay in this game. Jeremy McNichols does not do much for me on the running game. I'm sorry, but I don't know how they're going to run the ball. So I think Tannehill just by just the sheer volume of the times he's going to have to throw. And I think AJ Brown will have a good night too, as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Rams are middle of the road in terms of yards per attempt allowed as a rushing defense. So maybe not quite as dominant as you think, but like unless you really want to make a case for like this contrarian approach that they're not expecting Tennessee to be able to run because they don't have Henry, so then they're able to gash them with these backup running backs. Like I just don't see that happening. Like I actually sneakily kind of like the Adrian Peterson signing. I think he's been like a lot better than most guys who are in this like weird twilight phase of their career, bouncing around from team to team. Like I think he still, for the last couple of years, it still looked like 80% of peak Adrian Peterson, which is a really good running back, but he's still not Derrick Henry, and I think you're spot on to say that Tennessee's going to have to score with this Rams offense. And, their normal style of just like chip away 6 yards with Derrick Henry, you don't have that option anymore. And I think this is a game where they're probably playing from behind by a touchdown or two for a lot of it. So we're going to see Brian Tannehill rack up a lot of yardage, potentially in garbage time, but as far as MKF contests are concerned, doesn't really matter when the yardage comes.
Not at all. Does not matter at all. All right. I think that's going to do it for us this week, week 9. Nick, where can they follow you?
All right, guys. Last name, but the L becomes a 1. We need to maybe flash like a graphic on the screen or something to do like the math for me on this. WHA, the number 1 EN.
Nick, do not worry. Next week, there's plans to have a supercut of all of your explanations into one 7-minute video, which we'll hit the feeds next week.
Oh no, I should have known, but I appreciate all the work you guys do on the back end. You're doing the Lord's work.
I'm very much looking forward to that. You guys can follow me at Dan Watkins Radio. Thanks, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We got Matthew Berry on this week, and one of our other shows, he'll be talking Chiefs Packers for you guys as well. So check out all of our wonderful shows here for week 9 of the NFL season, and enjoy some football.